So we have to start because we have a tight schedule. Fokus framtid, our new seminar series, is about the future and about change. Change in how others see us, change in how we understand what we can contribute. I and our samverkansråd are keen to try to reframe humanities at Lund University and perhaps even Lund University as a whole. We have previously talked about Ukraine, Russia and Europe, but we also believe that AI represents a transformative development, one that calls for collaboration, mutual calibration and the sharing of insights across borders. Fokus framtid does not deliver outputs. Well, it does, but that's not the important thing. It initiates conversations and collaborations with new partners in untried constellations. One of the most rewarding experiences for me since we initiated Fokus framtid almost a year ago has been getting to know Alfa Laval and Patricia Kemp. And I'm convinced that there are many things we can achieve together in the future. Today, we continue building on what we have, but we also open the door to new players. Axis Communications, Copenhagen Business School, NIMA and the Nordic Makers. And most importantly, we invite students to take an even more active role in Fokus framtid. Why do we do this, Patricia?
Well, thank you so much, Johannes, and it's a pleasure to collaborate with Lunds Universitet and Johannes and the team. Well, we do this because we also believe that there are so many important topics that we need to address jointly. One being the theme of today, and also that you mentioned, the reframing humanities has actually opened up doors for us as well as a company within technology that we will address later on. This is a very interesting way to explore and to test the new ideas and ways of open up perspectives. And I would also like to say that we signed a MOU just a month ago between Alfa Laval and Lunds University, and that is also kind of a long-term commitment statement that we would like to invest even more in these kind of partnerships and exchanges. So we're here today because we want to listen to a lot of interesting and distinguished speakers. And our role today is not to moderate. We have passed that task, which is quite tough, over to the students, right? So you and I will be the timekeepers and more or less just presenting the names. And we'll be back in the end. So warm welcome. And this is the second step of the theme of AI and future of knowledge. Yes. So thank you. And I will now give back to you. Thanks.
So very briefly, so we will start with Peter Järnefors in a minute. And we have named this AI och det mänskliga tänkandet, but you are free to change as you see fit. Peter Järnefors is a professor emeritus in cognitive science with a profound interest in both artificial and natural cognition, representing, I think, some of the finest this university has to offer. And he will set the tone for today's seminar. And then we continue with Hans Troisa from Alfa Laval on AI and the future of knowledge. And we continue after that with Anna Thomasson and AI and universities, past, present and future. And then we go to Christian Henriksson, preparing students for a world of AI, and then we give the floor to the students. Very interesting from our point of view, but we will try to let them do this by themselves. Peter, warm welcome.
Well, I will soon talk about the consequences of AI for modern knowledge and so on. But before I get there, let me give a broad perspective on the development the last maybe 150 years. We had an industrial revolution in the 18th, 19th century. It was a big development both in technology and in science. And that led to wide changes in society. Religion became much less important than it used to be. And the sociologist Max Weber talked about the Entzauberung der Welt, the disenchantment of the world, or världens avförtrollning in Swedish. So he meant that we don't see the world as full of mystical things anymore. We think that science, technology can handle everything. And we became... We thought, we got this kind of hubris that the humans could solve everything. Technology, medicine, science could change the lives of people, make a much better world. Yuval Harari wrote a book called Homo Deus. We think of ourselves as the God. We don't believe in God anymore. We think of ourselves as gods. So that was a first step in the change of the world, the disenchantment of the world. But I think I can identify some more steps. And the second step was the globalization of the world. I mean, after the technological revolutions, we got changes in transport. We had trains and cars and airplanes that really changed the human life. That changed also trade. I mean, we can now buy strawberries from South Africa in the middle of the winter because we fly them in. I mean, and trade has become global, and communication has become global. It started with radio and telephone, then we got the TV, and then we got the internet and so on. And now communication is really, really global. So there has been the second stage is what I call the globalization of the world. The third stage, which I think we are in at the moment now, is what I call the elimination of the world. And that's what happened the last maybe three decades. We have internet, we have mobile phones, we have screens and so on. We spend more and more time on looking at these things, not looking at the world. We eliminate our interest and our presence in the world. And I mean, if you look, I sit sometimes on the train between Malmö and Lund, and I think about 90% of people sit like this. 2% or 5% sit in a book or a text. Very few people look out the window. So we lost the world. And I think this is a trend that we can, in Swedish we can say, sätta världen åt sidan. We live more and more via the screens. And the big companies want us to do that. I mean, Meta wants us to live in the metaverse. We want to live in a simulated world. The big companies want us to spend more and more time on the scrolling down the screens or using all kinds of AI tools, Google and whatnot. So the algorithms are made to make us dependent. It's like a drug. We become dependent on these tools. So we are looking less and less to the real world. The currency in this is called the attention economy. And the currency is not that they want to sell things to us. No, they want to buy our attention. That's what drives these companies. And this has profound effects on us as human beings. There is a very nice book by the American journalist Johan Hari called The Stolen Focus. It exists in Swedish as well, and I recommend you to read it because it gives a lot of perspectives on how modern technology has changed our relation to the world. I recently learned about a new disease, and that's called biophobia. Biophobia, that is, you're afraid of the real world. You're afraid of life outside. You don't like going out in the forest. You don't like meeting animals or anything like that. And I mean, this is a disease that has been increasing the last years. people are afraid of nature. I think partly this is a consequence of that we are eliminating the world. Okay, that's the background. What has this got to do with AI? And a very big point here for me is, I mean, I wrote this book, I think, a year ago, and I recommend it as a background. A very big thing is that AI systems live on screens, mobile phones or on computers. AI systems don't live in the world. There are robots. I'll get back to them in a second, but most of us are encountering AI on screens. What does this mean? Well, it means AI has no body. It's not embodied. We as human beings, we have bodies, we do things, we eat, we go to the toilet, we make love, and we do use the bodies in all kinds of ways. And that's very important for our lives. Now, AI, other systems want us to do less of these things and spend more time on the screen. And that's very important, because AI systems, I mean, if you take the chatbots, the LLMs, the large language models, they are trained on things that exist on screens. They are not trained on relations between humans in the world. They are not trained on interacting with the world. They are trained on disembodied things, and that makes a lot of difference. AI systems don't understand the everyday world. And I've been testing. I do a bit of these things in the book. I mean, AI systems do wonderful things. I'm not an AI skeptic. I really like what's been happening. Don't read me in that way. But we should know what AI can't do. And one thing that the systems can't do is reasoning about the everyday world. AI systems have no understanding of everyday physics, of folk physics. What happens if you hit your head in the door? What happens if you spill a wine glass? What happens if you meet a barking dog? And so on. They have no understanding of the everyday physics. They have very limited understanding of human-human relations. They are based on text, mainly, some pictures, some movies, and so on. But that's a very limited part of what it means to meet somebody else as a human being. We read emotions, faces, and so on in a very complicated way. We are not aware of how much of our human interaction that is dependent on the bodily interactions. So AI systems are bad at these things. And AI is continuing to eliminate the world for us, and we buy it. Unfortunately, we buy it. I mean, we are hooked by these algorithms. You can say that AI is clouding the world, or i skymmer världen in Swedish. And of course, now we get into the real topics of this meeting. AI affects education. I mean, we will have discussions on that, how it affects education. But you can look at, I started with the Industrial Revolution. Before the Industrial Revolution, most people worked with their bodies. Work was embodied. Farmers and all kinds of people. Very few people did work with their head, mainly priests and clerks and some government officials. Then we have had less and less people work with their bodies, more and more people work with their heads, and so on. That's been a general trend in universities. Was part of this disembodiment. I mean, universities introduced thinking that didn't use the body. I mean, there are certain areas. You can't become a doctor without being embodied. You can't become a nurse, and so on, without using your body. And there are some areas where we still work with our bodies or understanding the human body. But most education doesn't involve that. And if you look at the Swedish education system, the gymnasium has eliminated all these educations related to craftspersons, carpenters, electricians, cooks, and so on. They are not in gymnasium anymore. Denmark has kept it to some extent. In Denmark, you have what's called erhvervsuddannelse, that is giving a profession where you work with your body. And I think Sweden has made a mistake here in eliminating, making gymnasium a very theoretical education, not involving practical knowledge using the body. Okay, so industrialization meant that lots of people lost their bodily work. We got free of the most heavy works and so on. That's very good. I mean, we don't have to wear out our bodies in carrying things and transporting things and doing dangerous things with our body. It's very good. But this trend will not, this will continue. AI will lead to that a lot of repetitive work, and where you're based on working with all kinds of rules, being in an administration, in a social work or a bank person, whatever. I mean, lots of things are based on repetitive work, and that will be taken over to a large extent by AI. And that means that, well, a lot of people do these ordinary rule-following things, and some of it is boring, some of it may be quite interesting. But most of these jobs will disappear, and they will be where interaction is standardized. They will be replaced by AI. But there are consequences for this also. So this knowledge that's related to the body, that will not be taken over by AI. As I said, most of these AI systems, I mean, are based on methodology called deep learning. Deep learning is learning by neural networks. It's fed by data and so on. But deep learning networks are not embodied. And as long as the AI is driven by this methodology, I mean, it's totally dominating in the current AI development, the deep learning mechanisms. And as long as we have deep learning mechanisms, we will lose the embodied side of it. It might be that robotics can develop and we can include some form of embodied knowledge in AI. But the path there, I think, is very long. And by the way, some people say that we will have artificial general intelligence. Nick Boström, Max Tegmark in Sweden and others. I don't believe it. I don't believe we will see artificial general intelligence, because human general intelligence involves very much bodily knowledge. We understand causes and effects. AI systems are very bad at understanding causes and effects. We understand the interactions between humans and objects, between humans and so on. And that will not appear in AI systems as long as we have the current methodology. Then some people would say, well, robots then, can't they do the bodily work for us? No, they are still very limited. I mean, we have lots of industrial robots that can do very limited actions. So they can act within a limited area. This human ability to do things in all kinds of areas. So we can play music, we can run in the forest, we can play football, I mean, lots of bodily things. We are generalists in using our bodies. Robots are just very specialized. And getting a general use of the body is still a very difficult problem in robotics. And that means that craft persons, a seamstress, a carpenter, a cook, will not be replaced by robots in the near future. The bodily works will still be there. So AI will have effects on human labor in repetitive works, but in work where we are more bodily dependent, they will still be. And also, of course, people working with other human bodies, like doctors, nurses, and care persons, they will not be replaced. I mean, it's impossible. Think of a robot changing the diaper on a baby. That's totally impossible. No robot can do anything like that. Being flexible to the reactions of the baby, that's totally impossible. And as I said, also human interactions, so things having to do with human problems, psychical problems, or whatever, is still very difficult to handle by AI systems. So I think that psychologists and priests and so on will still be dependent. And that also means that the ethical questions will be there. AI systems have no way of handling ethical questions. They don't have any emotions. They can simulate emotions. They can simulate values, but there is nothing in the system. I think that these values are dependent on the human bodies. So ethical work will still be important. And finally, we talk about artificial intelligence. What is intelligence is a quite narrow term. I would like to replace it with good judgment, gott omdöme in Swedish. Actually, Danish has a good word for this. It's a dömekraft. That means omdöme. And I like this word, dömekraft. That means you have a power, a force to make a good judgment. And we don't see this power in the systems. They are specialized in areas, but they don't have the general capacity to judge things as we do as humans. So these are things, I've said some things about where AI will replace human activities, but I'm also claiming that a lot of activities are still far beyond the reach of the artificial systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Tack.
And Peter will be back in the panel later on, but there might be time for one or two questions while we shift to Hans, the presentation. So if you have one, then use your microphone and ask, but there's only time for one, maybe two.
Everything clear?
Thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
I think that, may I introduce Hans? I googled you, but then I chat GPT you as well. We are colleagues, Hans and myself, and yes, you have. Thank you. So there's a whole bunch of information on you, but the more important is that Hans, you are the CTO and IT leader at Alfa Laval, and what is Alfa Laval then? It's a global engineering company, and we specialize in heat transfer and separation and fluid handling technologies, and we're globally, and maybe you will come into that as well. But in your role, you are actually driving the digital transformation and the IT strategy, and kind of interlink this with new technology, AI, in this transformation. And there's a kind of 20 years of your experience that we will kind of have the short version on. And you're also very reputable and you know, warmly welcome speaker. So please take the floor and run us through a bit of your views on, amongst other things, I think the ethical aspects of what we heard.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I hope that Google is true then. Anyway, it's an honor to be here. I was actually here the last time as well, and I don't know if it's because I have to clarify things or if I should add new things. Let's see after my presentation here. I've been asked to look a little bit around the AI and the future of knowledge. I sort of incorporated a little bit of an agenda. I will actually start with something that some people in our organization might say hinder us from doing good stuff with AI, and some people might say that it's actually good for bringing trust for what we're doing. And I will also dwell a little bit on trust as well, but maybe from another angle. And then I will actually talk about as we call it, a use case, what we have constructed that people are actually utilizing a lot today, not only in Alfa Laval, but also outside Alfa Laval. So, and there will be some room for one or two questions later. So I will keep me very short now. So, about guidelines. There are a lot of guidelines when you're working in a cooperation with AI. Of course, we have ethical guidelines. I will not talk more about them now because I will actually, this is okay? Yeah, I will. And then we have something that's called EU Act. Is that familiar for you? That is an 800 pages thing of what we can and can't do with AI, and it's actually pretty good, I would say. In the beginning, I'm sort of have a legacy in Alfa Laval, not really to like governance, sort of really good, but actually when I read this, or partly of it at least, it's actually good. It gives us some guidance what we can do and can't do, and what we have to at least consider. And of course, we have business principles. I cannot show you them, the latest one, but they actually, AI is part of them. They will be released in our organization in the beginning of next year, I think, so I can't show them. We have more guidelines like information security. For instance, if you are utilizing a large language model at Alfa Laval, in Alfa Laval premises, that information stays in Alfa Laval and will not be spread all over the place. If you're wanting to have a conversation with a document, for instance, strictly confidential, that shouldn't be spread either, not even in the company. It should be you. It must be safe solutions. You should be able to trust them as well. And there are other things as well, of course, with that. So there are many guidelines we need to follow. And why do we have those guidelines, especially the ethical ones, which I will touch now? It's because you might think that a company, basically a manufacturing company where you have engineers in any corner of the company and people who are really curious about technology. Do you think that, how many do you think likes or trust AI in the company? More than 50% or less than 50%? How many think more than 50%? Raise a hand. It's actually around 25% who like to use AI in Alfa Laval for the time being. And the main reason for that is, of course, that you have heard about a lot, is that they will remove my job. And the second is actually they are scared, they don't trust it. And also, someone thinks we are implementing AI system without people knowing it. So they're just sort of confronted with it. There are a lot of things that we need to address, and therefore we are having some ethical guidelines. The first, I think, is very important also, the people-centric thing. We are doing AI use cases and using AI to remove tedious tasks, not to remove people. That is very important for us. It maybe sounds strange, but it is not, because I think that's also to create trust here. And of course, we need to have a responsible use. We need to understand the effects of AI. For instance, we can't use AI in all places because, for instance, in HR, we can't. For instance, if you have a system, AI system on a separator, high-speed separator, and suddenly people ask an AI bot, "Can I continue operating this while vibrating?" And there is a slight chance that the AI says yes. What will then happen? It can be a severe accident. So we also need to know where to use it and not. We need to be fair and compliant. We need to follow, we need to be compliant to the EU Act and to other things in our world and also in Alfa Laval. And now the most important one came here, sort of helping me very good here. The transparency part. Everyone in Alfa Laval should know when they're confronted with an AI tool or is a use case. And the one who actually they should also be who is responsible for it and what it contains. And you should be able also to know what it does with the data or information. That is really important. And of course, we need to protect the personal integrity, the GDPR, as you might have heard about as well. Those are our sort of ethical guidelines for using. And when someone, innovative guy or whatever, comes with a suggestion of building a use case, we're having sort of what we call a function we call responsible AI. Basically, when we read the suggestion of what they want to build, we add all our different guidelines on top of that. And if something is failing there, we will not build it. Or if they really want to build it, they can go to the next level where they can sort of continue discussing it. But I think we so far, we try to follow those guidelines. That is, as I said, also to build trust among our employees, and also nowadays also business partners that are also utilizing our solutions. Cool. So more about what we can trust. Alfa Laval actually some month ago decided not to go with the OpenAI or Microsoft Copilot or so on, because we think AI is more important than that. We don't want to put that knowledge in the hands of the hyperscalers or tech giants or whatsoever. But we can't stop the evolution of AI anyway. So we wanted to create a safe environment, a little bit also back to our survey. People don't trust us and so on. So we built our own virtual agent, Alva. Is it Alfa Laval Virtual Agent? Every abbreviation Alfa Laval has to have an AL, so you know that. That's basically a solution where we create trust. If you put a prompt here, it will stay at Alfa Laval. If you upload a document, it will stay at Alfa Laval. And if you remove a conversation, it's totally removed. No one can find it anymore. It's totally removed, and it only stays for 30 days, also to create trust. And you can decide if you want to use web search in combination with your language model or not, which we see in other solutions you can't. Because, for instance, if you upload a highly strictly confidential documents and you wanted to have whatever do with it, perhaps you only want to have it there. You don't want to mix in information from outside whatsoever. So it's also to create trust. But we're also seen, when talking about creating trust, is that which language model should you trust? Which is also quite interesting, because in the beginning, how many of you have used other language models than GPT family? Oh, so yeah, many of you. If I would have asked that for a while, it would only be GPT models. So we have launched this now that you can use many, and sometimes we are removing them, and sometimes we're adding more one. The most popular has become now GPT 5.1, I think, growing fast. Second place is actually Mistral, a European one, because it's really good for translating. Because the US models, when they are translating, they go from French to English, from English to German. Mistral goes directly between the languages, which is quite interesting. But there we have new ones as well. But this is also quite good because we encourage our employees to utilize more than one language model when they are doing their conversations. And we usually get questions, that language model is wrong, or that is more right, because they are answering different, which is quite interesting. And it's also have become more a learning, and we are trying more and more to evolve when should you use what, but we also would like to keep it a little bit up to the user. They should also create their own learning when they can use different ones. And for instance, many would like to ask, why do you have DeepSeek? You're a European company, but we have a big Chinese, many employees in China as well. They appreciate it a lot, since they can't use the other ones. And of course, it's also interesting to try out the biases in the different formulas, models. So, back to, keep the time pretty good. So, let's say we are Alfa Laval. As you said, Patricia, we have 3 different technologies. We are serving 30, 40 different industries. And in industries, we have multiple different applications. Just the permutation of that gives that we serve a lot of industries, a lot of applications, and you have to have a very large knowledge. And then we say to a couple of service guys, you have to be able to service everything. I mean, to get the service guy up and running takes 2-3 years in Alfa Laval, or did. What you see here is a football stadium, but you shouldn't think about the sport football. It's basically where we fly in all the employees of Alfa Laval in one football stadium, and they are there in 3 dimensions at the same time, and they connect via headset or the phone, because everyone has that. And in the mid-circle, you put in a customer or a field service guy or someone who wants to know something about Alfa Laval. An open question or a rhetorical question. Do you think that the knowledge exists in this football stadium? To that question. That is, I think that too, and it has been proven that it actually works. That is what we have tried to do, or are still doing, because every knowledge, or every section here is a little department in Alfa Laval which has this particular knowledge. And what we are trying to do is to combine that knowledge. That we have done via a language model and a use case. And we have seen that now a field service guy who usually take 2 years to become really good, productive, take a week, and then he can start to answer questions. They are not 100%. He has to have his own judgment, ask colleagues, but at least he had a very accelerated start. That is a way that we are using our sort of, as I call it, data, knowledge, and information. I call it just tribal knowledge that we have in Alfa Laval. So what we see there is very interesting how we can accelerating learning in the company in a smart way. And as we see also, we have time to do more complex things. We can spend also time on more value-added activities than the tedious ones that we can see also very clear nowadays, that when we start to share knowledge and do work like this. I think that was my last slide. Thank you.
Very much.
Oh, thank you. Oj, tack så mycket.
So, and we have time for one or two questions while we shift to, and it's Anna next, isn't it? Yeah. Go ahead. That sounds so much more advanced than at Lund University.
But you also have a lot of tribal knowledge, I think. Somewhere. There was a question of no?
Does it work? Okay. So I just thank you for the presentation. I'm just going to be a bit of a devil's advocate, if that's okay.
Yeah, I love that.
You said you use AI primarily to remove tedious tasks. But I would like to know first, who decides what these tedious tasks are, and how can you be sure that those tasks don't involve skills or knowledge that is actually valuable for the company or for the individual's personal, like professional development or things like that?
I think we try to, I'm not sure I will try to address the question because I think it's a good one and I hear it sometimes. We try to group use cases into buckets when we receive them, basically, because I hate to have many. One is sort of everyday AI, which makes my sort of administrative life, whatever I get when I produce a PowerPoint, for instance, that I get support doing that or find information in the company. I become more efficient. I can answer more customers, answer more quotes, whatsoever. That is sort of my personal efficiency. But then also, as we're touching here in my last one, it's also how we can beat competition. Because we can answer faster, we can take more service calls, because even if Alfa Laval is a good brand, we also have pirates. But if we can sort of arm our people that are more working with Alfa Laval with this kind of knowledge, we know they have better chance to win. I don't know if that's an answer on the question, a short one, but sort of, right? Think about the two groups first. And we are trying to and we can also see that the suggestions from our colleagues is more in the personal efficiency area than in the other game-changing area, sort of. It's coming from them. We are not innovating it ourselves in my team. Thank you.
So there are so many interesting parallels between Lund University and Alfa Laval. So, and I'm strange that we haven't discovered that before. I mean, other faculties have, but not mine. But we will develop that, and we also have. So now we are, from my point of view, leaving the ground that we have developed so far within Fokus Framtid, and we introduce hopefully our next partner, Copenhagen Business School, and we have worked, of course, with you before, but not for a long time. And I'm eager to pick up that collaboration as well. And perhaps there is not only business humanities, but many other things that we might do together. And this is all thanks to Anna Thomasson, because I shouldn't say this, but I say it nevertheless. We contacted Copenhagen University and CBS, and Anna responded immediately and said that, well, I have one student and one researcher and one company that I can bring to Lund. Copenhagen was positive, but they didn't come. So this is great. And Anna, you are Dean of Education at CBS, and from our point of view, we are very interested in how you conceive of the opportunities and challenges of AI in education, and if that affects the role of universities in the future. So warmly welcome to Lund.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be back in Lund. I actually used to work here for many, many years, so maybe that's why I responded so quickly, because it's so nice to be back. Yes, what happens when AI hits universities? Well, I got to experience that. It seems very dramatic, and it's not to say that I don't like AI, but that's actually what happened on the 30th or 11th of November 3 years ago, when AI was launched, or ChatGPT was launched, OpenAI launched that, I had worked at CBS for like 3 months or so. And when it hit faculty, the response was, well, this is the end. Let's go home. We can pack up and leave. So it was quite dramatic, actually. And there was a lot of voices saying it needs to be banned or we can go home. And a lot of also doomsday speakers saying that we will not survive this, how we will do. Well, we survived. We're here. I'm here. You are here. And we still have universities. And we actually moved away from that initial reaction of, oh, this is horrible. And at Copenhagen Business School, we have moved from ban to what we call embrace. We don't ban AI anymore. When we started, I would like us to start out with embracing AI, saying this is not something we can stop. It's the future. It's how technology develops. But the voices from faculty and also from the other universities in Denmark were quite strong, saying this needs to be banned. Students will be cheating. And how can we control that? So it needs to be banned. Well, I don't believe in banning things you can't control or follow up on. So we have landed in a policy we say that it's allowed to use AI. We need to work with AI rather than against AI. And we can also see other universities in Denmark has moved in the same direction. Of course, there are situations where it's not allowed to use AI, but then it needs to be clearly stated in the curriculum. So that's where we are now. And when you asked me, Johannes, to come and you said, can you give me the Swedish-Danish perspective? I think my experience was in the start, a lot of issues and questions regarding the legitimacy of universities. And I got a lot of media that called and asked, how do you do, especially with the final theses the students are to write? How are you coping with this? And I could see, still living in Sweden, that the debate was the same. And when I've been internationally in contact with people with a similar role as mine, I can hear the same discussions going on at the other universities. So this is not only Copenhagen, Sweden, or Denmark, Sweden kind of thing. It's actually an international thing where we can see universities moving in a direction where you start working more with AI, but in different ways. And of course, we have not the solutions. There's a lot of questions that still needs to be answered. And coming from a business school, I said that AI challenges the business model of universities, especially as we know it today. We are really good at bringing a lot of students into our universities. We have seen that for many decades around the world, that more and more young people go to universities for an education, which is great. But it also means that we have worked with more and more larger groups of students, a different kind of a way of working and teaching at universities to accommodate for that. Also, societal ambitions to have more people with a university degree, which is, of course, is a good thing. But when AI comes, I think it challenges that way of working at universities. And my reflection is the questions that we need to solve. I mean, we moved from a ban to an embrace, saying that it's not use working against AI. It's the future. We need to work with it. But then the questions are asked by me and many of my colleagues, how do we do that? How can we create value and stay relevant in an AI world as universities? How do we keep the legitimacy? How do we train the students for a future with AI? And what competences do they need leaving the universities? And how do we as universities, being not a fast-moving company or organization, but actually in Sweden and Denmark at least, publicly funded administrative large units with a lot of regulations around us, because we're also public authorities. So we should not move too fast, but we still need to keep up with the pace of the technology. How do we do that? How do we balance AI as an object with AI as a tool? That means, how do we learn the students to understand the technology? I don't mean that they all should be working with computer sciences and that kind of things, but they need to understand the basic foundations of how AI works to be able to deal with it going forward. But also we can use it as a tool to actually engage with students and their critical mind and thinking if we incorporate it in the way we teach. And also, what kind of questions are we to ask the students? How are we going to teach in an area where we have AI? How do we adapt our curricula to that? That's something that I've been discussing a lot. We've been discussing it at CBS as late as last week when we had an AI workshop. And I also listened to colleagues around the world, and I have landed in that we need, as universities, transform the curricula. The technology is new, but the need for education is greater than ever. And AI is not the solution to education. It's not going to replace universities, as I see it. We are still responsible for educating young people, or people all ages actually, to navigate critically, ethically, and responsibility in an AI-driven society. Because AI does not create knowledge. Universities, people create knowledge, and we've done so for centuries, thousands of years. And universities, the core of a university is actually to ask those critical questions to create knowledge. And we can still do that because AI is not taking that away from us. There's no competition for AI when it comes to that. We can use AI in different ways, but we still need to have the critical thinking, and we need to interact with technology and learn how to do that in a way that makes sense. So I have landed in, and I'm not saying that I have the answer to all the questions that I posed on the former slide, but I think as universities, we are still very, very relevant, because the core of a university, regardless of which courses you take as a student or which programs you're enrolled in, you have to learn how to think critically, how to work with knowledge, take part in creation of knowledge, and also distributing that knowledge in different ways and using it in different ways. And for that, AI can be a tool, it can help us, but we can still have a relevance as universities, as long as we start asking students different questions that enable them to use AI and still forces them to think. So my idea is here that we need to go back to the core of universities, asking the critical questions, the more to the core, what is knowledge, how is knowledge created, and let students use AI to prepare, but not for it to be sufficient to pass courses. And of course that requires a lot of development work, and also a way of transforming a little bit our business model, where we actually, in Sweden and Denmark alike, get paid per student that graduate or enroll in a course, or a combination of the two. And being in humanities or social science, we get less paid per student than they do in the technical areas, which also mean that it's of course a limit how much face time we can have with students, how many individual interactions we can have with students. But I think that would require us to go back to that and have that discussion. And then I think we have no problem in surviving in an AI world. So, thank you.
So there is time for questions here. Started this work?
Yes, we have. I think we have a good example there.
Okay. Yes.
But we have a lot of good teachers actually at CBS that have started that, and we also have pilot projects going on where teachers get to explore new ways of working with AI in education and in courses, in order for us to be able to scale it up, hopefully, later on. But we have a lot of experiments going on, and we need to allow for that bottom-up experiment, even though it's a little bit risky sometimes when it comes to information, controlling information. But I think it's necessary for us to develop, yeah.
They are thinking, thank you very much, I forgot this.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you.
So next here is another person from CBS, and it's Christian Henriksen, and he's a researcher and associate professor doing AI most of his time at CBS in various shapes and forms, as far as I understood it. So there is something that I hope to hear more about in this presentation about AI and students and what comes next. Are there any jobs for junior?
You'll see in a few minutes.
Yes, I will. So I hope there are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Warmly welcome to Lund.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christian Henriksen. I'm associate prof at CBS. I spent a lot of time talking about AI also with Anna. My research area is actually how people use generative AI at work. We wrote a little book earlier this year. It's in Danish. I'm sure you can read it if you understand Swedish, where we try to kind of make sense of how people use it in practice out in the workplaces. My everyday work is actually just using the models. I spend a lot of time training our teachers in understanding the technology. We run one of the pilots that Anna mentioned. So most of my day-to-day life is just staring into chatbots and thinking about AI. So I get asked this regularly by students. I actually had a student come up to me a few years ago in one of our bachelor programs, and she said, Christian, I cannot learn as fast in university as the chatbots are improving. So that was the fall 23. And I didn't have a really good answer, and I still really don't. We used to say that there's like a class of cognitive skills that the systems won't be able to do because it requires access to programs, or it's like interacting with different systems. But the systems are improving so fast that it's very hard to nail down cognitive capacities that we cannot reliably say will be taken over by AI. There are a few things that I think are important. So also based on what we heard earlier, there are a set of relational competencies that will be very hard to outsource to an AI, right? So me standing here, it's gonna be a while before you'll see a robot do the same thing, hopefully. But also sending out people to meetings with people, customer relations, meeting in Alfa Laval, saying hi to people, building relations with people is a people thing. So even if we get systems that are pretty good in many ways, we'll have relational competencies that will matter for a very long time, regardless of what kind of work we hand off to a computer otherwise. But there's a different set of things also. Leadership skills, which I think goes hand in hand with relational competencies, but then also what I would call task identification competencies. These are things about, okay, what are we actually doing with our time? What do we think is important? What are the ethical constraints? How do we decompose a problem into things we need to solve? Okay, we have Alfa Laval. We want to build an engine that someone's going to use, but how on earth do we approach that problem? Yeah, we can ask a chatbot, but we should also have a conversation based on our relational competencies that are important. So I think at least these two things, and I think actually universities do a lot of this already. So at CBS, one of the things I like the most is having small seminar-style discussions with students, where they work in groups and I discuss with them, which is very relational. And then, of course, technology stops. Do I then just click it? Does it work still? There you go. Oh, wait with that. And similarly, when we ask them to do analytical work, especially in groups, we are asking them complex questions about decomposing very large problems. And when we ask them to do it in groups, they also develop leadership tasks. So I think actually we're quite well positioned to this. But, and there's a very big but, there's some research that came out recently. So Brynjolfsson and two of his postdocs, I think it is, came out with a working paper. So Brynjolfsson, of course, very famous economist of technology. So what they did in this paper was that they took, or they were given access to payroll data from one of the largest payroll providers in the US. And then they did something clever. They took all of the payroll data and then decomposed it into the different sectors and tasks that was represented in the data, and then saw how many of those tasks theoretically could be done by a state-of-the-art chatbot in mid-25. And then they saw what happened to jobs. So what you're looking at here are 4 quadrants that correspond to top left, very high exposure to chatbots. Top left, a little. and then here not very much, and then not at all. So health aids is exactly people pushing other people around in wheelchairs. You're not going to have ChatGPT do that. But this one up here, the blue line, are jobs for juniors. You see what's happening? That line there is November 2022. So yeah, there's ups and downs, but the trend is very clear. The more you are exposed theoretically as a job to having a chatbot just do the task for you, the lower the number of positions for junior entrants. So those are our graduates. The yellow one you see there is people who are around 30 years old. Also decreasing, because those kind of tasks you give to a 30-year-old are also being done by chatbots. So they don't say that there's necessarily a direct causal link, but there's a very, very clear correlation here. I think it's probably going to be a while before we see the same pattern in Europe, but it's quite striking that we already can see indications that chatbots are having a job market impact in the US. But there's more. So in August, when GPT-5 came out, and I'm sure we all had a great time watching the live stream, OpenAI did a study, we could call it, an eval, called a GDP-val, cleverly named. So what they did was that they took the American economy and deconstructed it into the most significant types of tasks that contributed to GDP. So those are things like, can you make a marketing plan? Here's a conference program, can you do the seeding for it? Can you make this financial analysis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And then they took a representative set of those tasks and asked experts with 10 to 15 years of experience in those tasks to design the tasks, but also evaluate output on those tasks. And then what you do is you'd say, is the chatbot doing the task better or worse or the same as a human expert with 15 years of experience? So the red line there is parity. That's where you would be as well off just asking a chatbot to do the task that you'd otherwise hand to a 15-year senior. And in August, when they launched it, Claude Opus 4.1, got quite close, right? So just to give you a sense of it, the very best model we had in the world in May 24 was GPT-4, which hardly gets more than 12%. So can anyone guess how close we are to the line now, 4.5 months later? How many percent are we at? Anyone guess? Yeah, we are above, but how much above? 50? 55? How about 75? The best system that we have now since last Thursday, GPT 5.2 Pro, beats experts quite a lot. If you only look at the win rates, not ties, 60% of the time, people with experience in the field says that their output is better than the human. And we're talking about people with upwards of a quarter of a whole century of experience. Marketing experts, investment analysts. And so, of course, there's a lot of caveats here. It's made by the company that make the chatbots. Of course, we can criticize that. It's only on tasks that can be done by a computer or in front of a computer. It's only text-based, much of it. But still, it's quite striking. And the point here is that the models are trained specifically to be economically valuable. So if we are training our students to compete with the models on what the models are good at, we're going to have a hard time. We can still do things like we talked about before, relational competencies, task decomposition, but we should be aware that many of the things that are premium skills right now are being rapidly taken over, in theory, by systems. Yeah, so if you pay $20, you only have access to this one that only gets 70%, but still, I think we can live with it. In our book, we offer 3 ways of working with AI. I think many of us, and also we can probably hear today, when we think about language models or robots or AI, we often think about the routine task that you just like the AI to do for you, right? Can you translate this text or text? Can you make this PowerPoint slide? So those are kind of tasks where it doesn't really matter whether I did it or a robot did it. But there are also a lot of situations where it really does matter that there is a human in the loop, that I stand here, that you're going to a client meeting, that you actually sit in front of other people where the robot cannot do it for you, or the writing has to be yours. So those are situations where the robot gives feedback to you, or you spar with the robot. And usually when I talk to companies about this, I often ask a question, are you certain about what tasks in your company that has to be an AI, that has to be a human, or where you kind of need to know in the situation? And that really is a difficult question, because different employees will think differently about whether internal text, whether it's okay that it's AI written or not, whether you send something out to the public, that has to be human or not. What about critical analyses? If you end up in this world where probably very soon you'll be better off just using the best model in the world, does it have to be a human, even if the human might be worse? So those are kind of difficult questions that really shape, for me at least, how we should interact with the models. I think what's quite interesting, this is how I usually work, what we call hybrid work, where it's hard to then really nail down where the boundary goes between what is human and what is AI. So even this morning on the train, I had a long discussion with 5.2 Pro, which takes 45 minutes to answer, so it's a little slow. But it's really good. And I inject some of my ideas, and then it comes up with its ideas. And then together we can do something that I couldn't do alone, and surely the chatbot could not do without me. But I would not be able to look at that output and say exactly what was Christian and what was 5.2 Pro. So we've done something I couldn't do before. And I think, this is my controversial statement, if we only look at repetitive offloading tasks, we forget things where we can improve the output we do, even if it's important that it's a human. And we forget that we sometimes can do more with the model if we really try. And this is where we can use our expertise and relational competencies and leadership skills to do better, to create more value. Thank you. Right on time.
Perfect timing. All of you, I must say.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
And for the inspiring,
Thank you.
or whatever talk says.
Yes.
So we have time for questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the back.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. This is a question for you, or maybe for Anna as well. I'm a long-time instructor in the humanities and social sciences, and I feel like I've existed as part of a bargain that I get to teach my students in my subject area the stuff that excites me, and knowing that they're going to be getting critical thinking skills. Hopefully they'll learn something about the domain I teach them as well, but they're getting those critical thinking skills. And they're motivated. Well, students are often nice and they'll pretend to be excited about what I'm excited about, but they're also motivated because of that degree and diploma at the end. Their grades might matter, and this has social significance in our societies and has practical significance for getting work. It feels like this starts to break down, because my traditional weapons for teaching, reading, writing, talking, well, from the student's perspective, why should I go through the motions of doing things the way my instructor intended me to do them, or the way that they've been done in the past? Why not take a shortcut? Because the social significance of completing the degree and getting the grades will encourage them to do that. So as an educator, this makes me feel rather stuck with both my pedagogic mission and also my social mission. So I guess help.
Do you want to go first, or do you want?
I can try.
Yeah. You're the senior.
Well, what I try to say is, with changing the curricula, is that you can still let the students read and write. I think they should learn how to read and write. It's very important to train that. But when they come to class, can you challenge them more and ask, why did you write that? Or start that discussion and go into the relational things, as Christian mentioned, together with other students that also perhaps, or more likely, have used AI to help them write something. Can they compare what they found out? Because they will get different answers, even though they use the same tools. And could you challenge them on that, and asking other questions than you usually do? Or perhaps not only grade the written paper, but grade more what they say and how they interact. That would be my advise, test that and see if you can go beyond, because then you could actually use AI as a starting point. It's okay what they do at home if they train with AI and prepare with AI, but if you ask them the right questions in class, they will have to show that they learn something. And just using AI to write a paper is not learning, if you ask me. But they need to think or interact themselves, like Christian said he did on the train on the way over here. That's when you learn, and that's when you explore. So if that could be included in the learning process, so what the students do at home is not sufficient, then I think we could move forward as universities. But it's requires us to change the way we teach or are used to teach, and also would perhaps require more resources for teachers.
That's a good answer, and I'm not sure I can top you up. There is, to me, so I think it's very nice framing this bargain thing. I love to teach, and I loved being taught when I was a university student. Depending on the students you have, some of them will be intrinsically motivated, and some of them will be extrinsically motivated. I think at CBS we have a relatively high share of extrinsically motivated students who just want to get a diploma, get out, get a fat salary. But what I think would be the ideal case is that everyone who goes to university or to school in general will be intrinsically motivated to do so, because it will not be economically valuable to get better cognitive skills. Yes, there will be some things you learn, relational skills, leadership skills, but learning investment theory in 10 years, yes, it's nice to know when you're talking to someone, but there will always be an AI system that does it better than you. So you will probably go because you are intrinsically motivated. And the students I teach, I'm very fortunate the students I teach, I feel that they all kind of buy into this, and they are intrinsically motivated to come and learn about investment theory. So to me, the ideal case is that people go to university regardless of the economic value we can add, because we think it's fun to learn, and that we go and take your excellent class because we think that's fun, and I want to learn about ancient Italian history or whatever. Because if we end up in a system where we have to force students because they're extrinsically motivated, and there's no longer a kind of carrot because, why do you need university degrees for cognitive reasons, then people never show up. I think that we should cultivate the intrinsic motivation to learn in every aspect of our education system. I'm not sure how. So
let's challenge that. Thank you, Christian. I think maybe you will be in the panel, and now I am going to invite one last company, the smaller one maybe, but we all start small. So you see here Alfa Laval, Copenhagen Business School, Axis, and now we have the Nordic Makers, and we are so happy that you're here. When we were talking about, how should we bridge this conversation, we found out about you, and you have been actually a student at the CBS, an alum, and you have now started 2 companies. Were you a student with Christian, or?
Yeah, we actually studied the same thing.
Good. Nima, I'm so happy that you're here, and please, first of all, tell us a bit about your companies. Well, yeah, the Nordic Makers, and also, can you just maybe reflect just on what you have heard, if that's possible, and then you will join the panel, and I will hand over to the students. But you're so welcome, and tell us,
Thank you so much.
your journey and the Nordic Makers.
Yes. Well, hi everyone. My name is Nima. I'm from Nordic Makers, and we are definitely the smallest company here because we are 1.5 person. So it's really, really small. It's an investment group. We're all previous entrepreneurs who invest together. We invest in tech startups in the Nordics. Software. Before that, I had started my first company when I was still at CBS called Blue Lobster, and that was a digital marketplace for sustainable seafood. So like a very niche-y thing where we had fishermen on one side, restaurants on the other, and then we tried to cut out all the middlemen so that the fishermen could get a better price for their fish, and we create an economic incentive for fishermen to use sustainable fishing practices. And we weren't so active around Lund, but we did have a lot of fishermen up in Göteborg and Gothenburg, and we were big in Copenhagen, sold into Germany, that kind of stuff. We started it back in 2019, so the AI revolution hadn't really taken. But I think one thing I was reflecting on, speaking listening to everyone speak today, is what can you really use something for? And I remember one of the things that really frustrated me working in the fishing industry was one specific problem that came to the regulation about how much fish you can fish. So there's two ways when we talk about sustainability. One is like how we fish, that's what we worked with, and the other one is how much we can fish, that's public governance. And when we met the fishermen, they always said the same thing. These biologists, they don't understand anything. They come out with reports and they're wrong, and they say we can't get cod anymore, but we see cod here. And then in 5 years, they say there's no flounders here, but there's loads of flounders, we can see them coming up. And I was like, okay, it was just like fishermen being pissed off about not being able to fish the fish they wanted to. But when we went in to look at it, and there was some like truth in the annoyance in that it took a really, really long time to process all the data that came. So the governance systems would take all the fishing data, they would process it, and then it takes a couple of years to really figure out how are the fish stocks, because it's a lot of data and it's a lot of things that interact with each other. And so that would take a couple of years, and then we have to go through policy making and blah, 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 blah. Suddenly we're 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and the fishermen are seeing with their eyes a different reality than the one that our governance is making fishing quotas on. So one dream that we kind of work with now is helping improve the data quality that goes into the fishing ministry. And what we need to see now, and where I think AI for fishing has big potential, is how we can speed up the analysis, because there's so many complex things of how fish stocks work together and things. I won't bore you with the details, but it is a big, heavy lift. So it's a lot of data that has to be analyzed. If we can speed up that process just a little bit, I think we can have way more sustainable oceans. And that's a fantastic use case, I think, for AI, where we just can see we can't keep up with the way that the marine ecosystems are dying today. But Nordic Makers doesn't work with fish at all. We invest, as I said, in Nordic tech startups. And I think one thing that we're seeing on the AI, as a final note before the panel starts, is that it's just changed everything in terms of how quickly teams perform. The startups now, everyone in VC, by the way, is waiting for the first one-person billion-dollar company, because everyone's sure it's going to happen. You can outsource so many tasks. And when we're looking at codes, I think Claude was up there before. It's a fantastic coding thing. We think the estimates are about the majority of code that gets deployed today is not written by humans, it's written by AI. Which means that for us, where we usually, as investors back in 2022 or prior, we're looking at the tech, how much was built in-house, how much was built with the tech talent that was there. It's not much more about that. We're actually over to more relational skills, more critical thinking skills at the founders. How can they use the instruments, and the technical coding is less important. I think.
Yes, and with those inspiring introductory words, I would like to hand over to our students. It's Lucas and Elisabeth, together with, well, you are supported by your colleagues there, preparing some questions, but I will actually now just leave it to you, and you will welcome the panel.
Yes, we will. Do we have, yes, we do. We want to create some dynamic. We'll make it broad here. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for being here. My name is Elisabeth Roslindel, and I am the president of the Student Union for Humanities and Theology.
Yes, and my name is Lucas Schultz, and I'm the president of the Social Sciences Student Union. So today's panel brings together voices from academia and industry, at a moment when students are asking themselves some pretty difficult questions and sometimes uncomfortable questions about AI. So AI is something we, our fellow students and student unions discuss and engage with every single day. And as we see today, we are not alone in this. So therefore, in preparation for this discussion, we have been in dialogue with students and captured some questions and collected our thoughts. Yes.
And during this work, one theme stood out very clearly. Students feel personally very worried about the rapid development of AI, but they do not want the universities and the companies to share that fear. Instead, they expect institutions to be responsible, forward-looking, and capable of guiding society through this change. They see universities as actors that drive technological development, shape its direction, and sometimes even slow it down when needed. And even more importantly, they look towards the labor market, to companies and future employers, to uphold clear ethical, environmental, and social standards so that they can feel confident stepping into their future professions. Today, we will explore these expectations further by bringing together questions from students along with perspectives from both the university and the industry, drawing on discussions we have had with students across several faculties and presenting the main topics and concern that they have brought up. And unfortunately, we won't have time to go through every question that we have received, but if you, at the end of this panel, feel like your question hasn't been answered, there will be a Q&A. So write it down if you have anything that you need to say.
Yes, so please, we welcome up our panel here. So you can all come up and we'll do one by one here. So some of these people you've already seen today. So Peter, Christian, and Nima, please take a seat. And then in addition, we also have from Axis Communications, we have Joel Sjöblom. Joel, I'll let you say a few words if you want to introduce yourself as well. Maybe you want to.
All right, I can say a few words. So my name is Joel. I was studying engineering physics in LTH between 2009 and 2014, and then I did a PhD in neuroscience, studying about Parkinson's mostly in white rats over in BMC and Medicom Village. And I found myself thinking a lot of the time, wow, the brain is really cool. I wonder if I could do this on a computer. So once I finished my PhD studies, I thought that maybe I should move over to working with AI. So that's how I ended up at Axis, working with AI there. And Axis is a big company here in Lund. We have 3,500 people, I think, here in Lund. And we're one of the biggest security camera companies outside of China. And I work with AI in those cameras. Mostly we do things like object detection is one of the largest things. So we detect what is people, what are cars, things, what can we see in the image. And from this, we can do things like seeing if someone's in the industry area at night where they shouldn't be. We can count the number of cars going into the parking lot. Things like this, basically building apps on the camera. And we've had a lot of excellent discussions here. And I get really into thinking about lots of them. And I've been kind of making up a three-pointed diagram where we have the questions that I was mostly interested in, that was really firing up my brain, which is questions about how do we learn, what can we use AI for, and how do we make sure that our competences that we learn are still relevant in the future. And then another point of that is the ethical aspects, both how can I make sure that I use AI responsibly, but also how can we make sure that the AIs I use are created ethically and responsibly. I don't have a lot of answers to these, but I think these are very interesting things to think about. And then the last point of this triangle that I don't think we've talked about at all is environmental aspects. Because when everyone uses AI and developing AI, it takes a lot of energy. And I think we will end up in a world where we need a lot of energy if everyone's gonna start using AI. And that will have a lot of impacts, I think. And
it shall all be discussed today.
Yes, and that was my finishing. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat. And in addition to that, we also have Professor Eva Åkesson here from Lund University. Would you want to say a few short words? Yes.
Well, Eva Åkesson, Professor in Chemical Physics, Senior Advisor to the Vice Chancellor, and been working with policy of generative AI for Lund University the last year.
Thank you. All right. Now that we have our panel here, let's begin with the core question students often keep returning to. If AI can do so much, we've heard a lot about what they can and can't do today, but what does it mean to have human agency today? As I said before, our students have expressed a strong trust that universities will equip them with the tools they need to navigate an AI-driven society. But how would you, as both representatives from the university but also from the industry, what would you define, regardless of discipline or industry field, the core human capabilities students should cultivate now that AI can perform so many cognitive tasks?
Well, you said agency. I mean, AI systems are not agents. They are tools. And we tend to see them as agents. We tend to be anthropomorphic and see the systems as being some kind of person we can interact with, or not person, but something we can have an interaction. But they are tools. They are tools like when we invented wheels and we invented all kinds of things, we're extending our capabilities. And AI can do things on its own, but we use it. I mean, you still cannot let an AI alone and run a system. We have to do it in interaction with humans. So AI and humans together can do lots of things that humans can't do alone. AI alone can't do very much.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so there's an academic discussion about what agency is that I'll leave on the table, because there's a lot of papers about that. There's two things I think is important. I like the idea about hybrid agency. So hybrid agency to me is when, okay, humans have agency, but AIs have some kind of agency. That's probably not the same kind of human agency, but some kind, right? And so it's actually very easy to see. If you have a paid subscription to any of the chatbots and you ask it a fairly difficult question, you send it off to a reasoning trace. And part of the reasoning process, so when I'm on the train, when I'm waiting 44 minutes for 5.2 Pro to answer my question, it's actually making choices on my behalf about what to do, what things to search for, what are the documents to use, etc., etc. And it does it based on an intentionality I've given it. I've said, like, this is a prompt, go do it. But it's making micro-level choices. So there's a sort of hybrid agency where I've given intentionality to the system, and then it makes some choices that I've allowed it to do. I'm not totally sure on where we put the boundary of what that could be. There's a very interesting benchmark called Vending Bench, where you simulate a vending machine. And it's a system. You have to take into account your suppliers. There's some price setting. You have to adjust to market forces. There's no human that can beat the best LLM in running a vending machine. So is that a kind of agency that's different? Probably. But it's certainly a system where you hand off the tools and say, maximize profit, go ahead. And the tools are better than humans. So I think there's something to be found in thinking about what kind of agency a human has versus a machine, and what you give to the machine to optimize for a certain objective. And then that's the human that finds out what the objective is.
All right, and contrary to that, are there any, from the industry point of view, any AI-related skills or ways of thinking that you didn't expect before, but that you now expect from newly graduated students coming into the work life?
That's a difficult question with what skills we expect newly examinated graduated people to have. But I think in general what we need is we need to trust what comes out. And we talked about trust in humans, but I think trust in AI is a huge part here. If someone comes into our company and makes great code and pushes it, we expect them to be responsible for that code. So if they don't know what they have pushed, then we don't feel secure about that. We want someone to have looked through everything. And then we're really happy about using AI. That's fine, as long as you've read everything and understand yourself what it's doing. And also these critical thinking. I think that's probably the biggest thing. You need to know what decisions to start going, what solutions you want to go towards.
Yeah, agreed. I think we absolutely expect everyone that comes out to be able to use AI very actively in their work, because I think anyone who doesn't utilize AI to automate part of their processes, they're running behind. And so what we're expecting, as you said, of course, to have a critical eye on what they're working with, but it's really to understand how to use it more than Google, because there's some people who just go in and use it as a Google, but how do you actually automate processes, like the first one on your slide? How do you actually do that step? We would expect that from new students, and that's what newly graduates hopefully have as an advantage over people who've gotten used to implementing older practices. what I spend a lot of time, especially with younger team members, is to take a step back, because things really do move quickly. And I think one of the benefits of things moving slower before, where we had to build every little piece and component ourselves, is that we had time to go home, eat dinner, and think, oh my God, was that right? Like, was that the right choice to make? So I spend a lot of time taking speed out of my team when the processes are going so quickly, and say, hey, have we really thought about if we're asking the right questions? Are we really sure that we've made the processes correctly? Are we, like, it's easy now that we can do things so quickly. Within one day, we can build a whole new process. We can build a whole new marketing flow or whatever. And sometimes, even when you're sitting working with AI loads, then the LLM is saying, oh, you should consider adding this step or this step or this step. And you're like, oh, that's great, that's fantastic. And you end up in this isomorphic place where you're just creating the same and replicating what everyone else is doing. So I think having those conversations internally also helps us, like, take a step back and say, are we asking the right questions? Are we being critical? And what is our actual wanted outcome? And are we automating things to that end?
Yes, I think we'll move to the next theme then, which is sustainability. So one of the biggest barriers that student mentions towards using AI and talking about AI is not always automation, but it is sustainability instead. They worry about water use, about energy consumption, about data ethics, and long-term societal impacts. So many said explicitly even, if companies cannot show clear guidelines, it becomes harder for us to imagine working there. So to all panelists, I'd like to ask, students often describe sustainability as one of the main sources of hesitation towards AI. How do you balance the environmental footprints of AI against the value that it creates?
Well, I think first we have to start to measure it, which we do not do in a transparent, open way today. I hope Lund University is going to do that in the future, being #1 in the world in sustainability. I think to keep that place, it puts some pressure onto us. There are other universities that are trying. I mentioned Edinburgh earlier today during the lunch. They have a language model where actually they have like a green tools, so that this takes less energy if I choose this, and they're also working with a dashboard to display how much the university and what in energy. But then also I would say sustainability is not only energy, it's also social and all the other dimensions on sustainability, which I do hope and expect this university to address in the future.
Should have had more mics.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, students should keep asking these questions because it's really, really important. Another thing is that the energy usage, as you said, that's one component of it, but how can we use AI to solve some of the other issues that we have? How can we some of the complex issues that we need more computing power for, how can we help industries that haven't been able to go through the green transition as quickly as possible? So also being intentional about what problems we're solving with AI. And then I think there's also some about the models. When we saw ChatGPT come out, that was a really heavy model. I think we can gain some inspiration from players like DeepSeek who came in and made more efficient models. So I think there are also choices there, and I think there are some geopolitical reasons why many people prefer ChatGPT over DeepSeek, but sustainability-wise, I think there's a lot of inspiration in how they're building.
I don't have a general solution, to just have a comment on the current models that are using so much energy. I mean, they are based on deep learning, and the new models have hundreds of billions of units, and they take a lot of energy to train. And they learn to pick up patterns, but it's very costly. I mean, this training is extremely costly. Compare that to a human brain. We can learn more and more generally using a fairly limited amount of energy. So a human brain is not as costly as a ChatGPT. Why is this so? Well, deep learning is one way of learning, but it means that we haven't understood how humans learn. Human is much more efficient at learning. We don't know what's happening in the brain, how we learn so quickly. I mean, a child can pick up a language in 2 years, and with very little input. ChatGPT can do it in maybe a month, but with lots of input. And there is still a big difference between how machines learn and how humans learn.
Then maybe a natural follow-up to that is, should AI entail a slowing down, or sustainability entail a slowing down of AI in any certain areas?
Try different methods that don't use so much energy. I mean, try other things than deep learning.
There is a lot of interesting things to talk about in the general intelligence AI human brain, but I don't think that's. I would love to dive down into that rabbit hole. But if you think about the other aspect that you asked both about the environmental but also ethical part. I think, at least for us, we're thinking a lot, like every time we want to use something new, we go to our legal team and have them read through everything about that specific model that we want to use. And they don't just look at, can we use it legally, but they also go back to see, was this model ethically trained? Can we be okay with using it? And I think these kinds of things are really important. It's really easy to end up in this, we want to use this, because if we don't, whoever they are, will use it, and we will be left behind. And this kind of fear of not being in the front and being competitive anymore, I think, is one of the biggest driving factors towards taking shortcuts. And there, I think, big regulations are really important and will be really helpful. With the AI Act that we had, we've been really happy about having clear guidelines, what's okay and what's not okay.
Yes, it's a very important question. Maybe I'll attack the premise and then I'll put on my economist hat. There is so any of you know where the term carbon footprint comes from? It's yeah, you know. Yeah, exactly. The oil companies actually invented the term carbon footprint to make us individually responsible for our carbon footprint. And so now we are suffering from the consequences because we're like, oh no, should I prompt ChatGPT today? It's like, it's 3 milliwatts. Okay, yes, it adds up when you have 1 billion people every week using models of various sizes, and the aggregate is staggering. But individually, I don't think we should be too concerned about it. I'm way more concerned about whether you ride a bike or drive a car or whether you eat beef, because those are way more consequential. But chatbots are not, individually. I think we should shift from individual blame to societal considerations. What does Europe do when China and the US are building data centers at a staggering amount? Can we even do anything, right? So if we're just going to hide and say, oh no, I've spent my 10 prompts today, I'm not going to do anything. And then meanwhile, China builds like a new dam every week to power their data centers. It just feels like a little bit silly. But the other thing is, we should ask ourselves, where do we put resources more effectively to the things we want to accomplish? If we're spending energy on chatbots to just cheat on exams, that's probably not a good way to use it. Do we just make cat videos that are fake? But are we using it to accelerate things that are important? Do we make better investment decisions? Do we accelerate sustainability concerns? Can we use the models in better ways? I think those are legitimate concerns. But then we need to actually figure out how to use them for this purpose. And paradoxically enough, that requires us to use the models anyways.
Thank you very much. This is then the halfway point of the initial part of the panel here. So we'd like to also invite a student from Copenhagen, from CBS here, to reflect upon the theme so far. So Claudia Montaner, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and present some reflections?
Hi, my name is Claudia. I am a student at CBS. I study international business and politics. Before I studied there, I studied journalism in the US during 2017 to 2021. Very fun times, Trump's first administration, and COVID. So I am very aware of the effects both of, how the internet and an abundance of information can disrupt an industry, right, while you are being educated. Today I work with Christian on a project related to AI, maritime choke points, but I also work with AI across, I would say, both my daily life and in other parts of my work. I've actually worked with Axis separately through Milestone Systems, so, but that was on the public affairs side. And so I think I wanted to touch on a theme I've been thinking about a lot throughout this discussion, which started with the Industrial Revolution, right? And ended at the end of the world. And now we're here. And so I think something that I hear is this idea of value. That, before value was added in the Industrial Revolution today, then globalization happened, right? Value was intellectual property. And today we stand at a point where intellectual property is sort of nameless and ownershipless. Thoughts between the human and the AI are blurry. And so I think that we hear the terms fear and trust. And that comes from a point where it seems that we are both, having a hard time finding both internal value. What do you study? That's why you want students to go to school, but also finding new ways to create value in a workplace, because value has to be measured, right? There needs to be a place to measure value. And that's where I think we see a lot of, confusion, both in universities and in the workplace. And so I guess what I've been thinking about now is, if it is the end of the world and we both, we're both bodies and not bodies and we're somewhere in between, right? What does that mean for, what does that mean? Does it mean that it's a bigger question, but are we struggling to answer these questions because there isn't a system in place that can quantify this next version, of value that we're trying to create? And I guess my big fear coming from journalism is you see this siloing of information when value disappears. The gig economy comes, right? You lose this stability. So, how can the Scandinavian model, also of collective shared values in an institution, recreate a new form of value? And what does that mean when it's, when it's hard to quantify? It's a big question, but yeah, that's what I've been thinking about.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Then we'd, as you do in these things, we're running out of time. So we'll do one question on fair of employment and then move on to responsibility. So, Elizabeth, if you would like to.
All right. Perhaps the most striking student perspective that we found while asking our students about AI is that they believe that universities and companies carry major responsibilities for the direction society takes with AI, not just legally, but also morally. So our students say that they expect universities to not only teach them, but also to steer, guide, and slow down societal change when needed. How do you view, as Lund University and CBS, but also from the industry point of view, the university's role in society of shaping the ethical and societal direction of AI development?
Well, one thing is live as you learn or as you preach. So I think it's very important that we, as a part of the academic community, are extremely transparent, honest, open, how, why, and when we use AI. And also, as you touched upon, that we do this with trust. And I think it's extremely important to talk about what we're doing, and also when we're doing things that are wrong or making mistakes and showing them. Because I think the worst case scenario is if we, as teachers and researchers, hide what we're doing and the students do the same thing. And I think then something is fundamentally broken at the university. We have to have an open conversation, a critical conversation, and do this together.
Okay, it's a big question. So around a month ago, I ran a faculty workshop at CBS, and we had invited a cool professor from the UCL to talk about AI, and we had an AI discussion. Great. And I ran a workshop where I asked people, okay, imagine you are in 2035. There is no cognitive task in front of a computer that a human will do better than an AI system. What does that world look like? What is a university in that regard? And of course, like academics they challenge the premise instead of actually discussing the situation. But what I'm thinking a lot about in these discussions is that if we expect that these things are panning out the way we think they are, there will be a massive data center build out, there will be algorithmic advances that will make it more efficient or better or stronger, whatever. And you can see the number, what happened in 4.5 months. So now roll out 10 years. Clearly things are going to happen. if that is true, then the problem is not about universities, it's about society. And then for me, the role of university is to help students talk to us or everyone about how we organize society. What does a job look like in 2035? What does the social contract look like in 2035? What are we even doing here? And that's not something where we can kind of equip students to be like, now you go into an AI job market, good luck, have fun. This is about having a discussion about the kind of society we'd like, both about responsibility, ethics, sustainability, but also what we're going to do as humans. Clearly, we're going to do some things, but what will that be? How do we organize society? So when we have discussion about trust, which I'm fully on board about, then we also have to discuss things like, what are the incentives we give students? Well, you want grades to get a job. But suddenly, if we take the job out of the equation, then we can have an interesting discussion. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there to have a very serious discussion about, okay, things might pan out in different ways. We might just hit a plateau, or the models may take off. But in any case, we're probably going to do some things different. And that's a conversation the university can host.
Universities were taken back by ChatGPT and other large language models because they created problems for examination and so on. And my question is, what can we do about it? I've had no general solution, but one observation I want to make is that student feedback to teachers is very much based on text in most educations. I mean, there are educations like doctors or engineers and so on, where you do things, where you use your body. But in all those educations where you don't use your body, it's based on text. And of course, students can now produce the text using the LLMs. So what to do? Well, change the system so you're not evaluating students with text. So the major British universities like Oxford and Cambridge, they're still using tutoring as a system. You have dialogues with the students, and you check what the students know via this dialogue. It's more expensive than the system we have now, but it's more it's a better test that the students understand. That's maybe one way of handling this problem. I mean, the problem is created because the feedback from the student is in form of text. Now we have other systems that generate text. We have to find other ways to evaluate students that's not based on text only.
We'll maybe go back then in our little structure. Elizabeth is looking at me confused, but I'll say one thing here that I think is important. So, is there anything? This is to CBS and LU. Then, is there anything that you think that your universities do very well in this department, or that you, or the complete opposite? Anything that sticks out either positively or negatively? With LU or CBS then, anything that they do well in this department, or that they should do very much better on?
I think we are doing very well with our students, educating students and discussing, having seminars. And my hope and my dream is that with AI, we will have more time for talking, seminars, and actually 150 years ago, you didn't write your thesis yourself. Your supervisor did, and the examination was how your rhetorics. So it's like maybe we're just closing the circle. So going back to the old school, it's actually the rhetorics that are examined, that you can actually defend your thesis. It was the defense that were important. But then also when we are in this, I wouldn't say rat race, but what is the meaning of life? I think that is an important question, actually. I think thinking, mind, consciousness, thoughts, they are very, very important for us. And I don't think we should lose that. The risk I see with AI is that we are getting lazy. So maybe like when we had all these machines that were taking away the labor, we needed gyms. We're running there all the time, some of us at least, trying to keep in shape. So maybe we need brain gyms later on to train to think again. But I think it's extremely important that we keep focus on the right things, and meaning of life and purpose and being humans are extremely important. And learning is a very important part to actually deal with your life, to be able to die in a good way. Sorry.
Thank you. I'm not close to dying, I'll say, but hey, let me ask ChatGPT. Oh, that's true. One of the things that I think CBS has done well, and thank you to Anna, is that early on senior management had, Anna talked about the whole process, but as a researcher and teacher, I had the impression that if I did something that was interesting for CBS on AI, I would be able to do it and show it. So there is now still, I think, a social contract at CBS where you can do a lot of stuff and then you use your judgment on what you do and what you put into the bot. But then also show it to people, right? If I found that you can use it for something interesting in teaching, okay, we did a pilot project, right? If I find that it has something that's valuable for our admin people, I go and show it to our university director. And so there's a lot of universities where I've talked to people that are kind of at a standstill because upper management doesn't want to prove anything until you prove that it works, and then you buy some license and it's like, But then people don't want to try it out because they don't feel like there's room for it, or there's no risk appetite, or just experimentation. And I think at CBS we've broken that problem. We have 700 licenses for ChatGPT Enterprise and Edu format. They've been taken away by all our researchers and educators, and now people are experimenting with frontier models. And there's really not a lot of universities where you can say that. And I talk to people in the UK, in the US, elsewhere in Europe, and people are like, you have 700 ChatGPT licenses for teachers? What? We hardly have Copilot, you know. And that means that we can be part of a conversation where it's like, yeah, now we can try it out. We have a safe environment. I can try it out as a teacher with a login, that's fine. And I'm doing it on models that are frontier. So we're not living in a 2024 world, or God forbid, 2023 world. We actually use systems that are pretty good and are comparable to the ones the students use. And the ones you use in Alpha Laval, probably. So that is very important, I think, to have the experimentation and a space for people to use our brains to figure out what we can do with this technology, because otherwise you're stuck in that negative loop.
Thank you.
All right. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of we don't have more time, but there was a question about also the fear of lack of jobs, and one of the questions was that whether that fear from students are justified or not. But I think we'll see. But what the different institutions should do in order to meet that fear, and maybe this sort of meeting and panel discussion is one of them. So we'll see if there's some more questions about that. But before we open up for the Q&A, me and Lucas just wanted to say thank you for all your insights, and thank you to all the students who contributed. If there's one message from our students today, it is that they want to be able to engage with AI, but they also want guarantees of sustainability, of responsibility, transparency, and long-term human capability.
Yes, so they're not only preparing for the labor market, they're preparing to shape the society that comes after this. And panels like this help us navigate that in order to make it happen in the best way possible. So thank you very much. Then we'll move to some questions. So are there any questions? I'll walk around a bit here.
Thank you for the wonderful panel. I have been slowly thinking of the questions as they have popped up in my head, and somebody else has answered them, so I'm going to try to combine the last two questions that I have in this regard. I'm a person that has some issues when it comes to trusting AI, and I think that trust comes from transparency, which we have discussed a lot in here. And at one of the previous discussions that I've had about AI, it was focused on sourcing of AI and how universities are trying to figure out same systems that we have for sourcing literature and the course, the sources that we have right now. How do we implement that for AI? And therefore, when I am using AI, I like to use models that allow me to see where that information is coming from. But how can we improve the transparency in that regard? That was my first question, and hope that you might have some like innovative ways of looking at that. My second question comes, in terms of training, because I've heard many times that it is not about what the AI can only give you such good answers as you the well you prompt them. And my question is then, how do we approach AI training not only for students so that students know how to not only critically engage with the results that are given back from the AI, but also how do we learn how to prompt it, and how do we teach not only the students but also the lecturers how to work with AI in that regard, and what have CBS and what is Lund doing in that regard for not only training students but also training our lecturers so that they know what is happening in that regard. Thank you so much.
To answer.
At least with the last questions. Transparency of AI, I know a little bit less of, but maybe someone else can pitch in there. But when it comes to training students and faculty members, I think we have started a model at CBS where we actually train all our staff, administrative and faculty, in AI. And as Christian mentioned, he's part of that training. We also need to be better at training the students and include that in across our courses, and that's why we develop the methods through the pilots, where we can closed into one course use AI and test different ways of training the students and evaluate, and hopefully we will be able to integrate that across all our programs. That's the final aim, and that's also explicitly written in the AI strategy that we are currently implementing day by day there. But we are not really there yet. It takes a lot of resources and it takes time, and we need to do it. I think we need to continuously doing that because AI keeps developing. So that's a major challenge. How do we keep pace with that, with informing and training students as well as all the staff we have at CBS at the same pace? That's a headache.
Do we have time for more questions? Yes. Any more questions? Or any answers, maybe?
Well, I would just say very similar situation at Lund University, to make it short, so it's better to have new questions.
I'm running.
Thank you very much for a very interesting panel. I think Anna has mentioned that what is in the air is that we need another model of university, not based on a business model. And it is connected as well to the perspective that the many so-called academic jobs will disappear. So can universities still stay attractive for students? Do we see the end of so-called mass universities? What about this?
I start briefly. I think we also heard other voices saying the same thing. We need to, as universities, go back to our roots and go back to where we started from. And yes, maybe, hopefully, to some extent, the end of the mass universities. But I still want us to educate a lot of young people because that is necessary, but in a different way, yes. More traditional, how we used to do it, 100, 150 years ago or more, actually.
Yeah. Also tying something in, but you were asking about the prompting and things. I think that's kind of like a hard skill. So I think, and the reason that I think people keep coming back to the critical thinking skills is also that the hard skills is something that needs to be taught. But it's like math, or it's like basic math. You know, there's some things that we should make sure that everyone in our society understands. And I think this is a really interesting question of, I think we will lose jobs. I think that if we don't admit that, then we're not being quite honest about the problems that are ahead, and how does that look? And maybe what we're looking at is more physical jobs, and how do we improve? Maybe we lean more into those things, and are we looking at things that bring us closer to nature? Are we looking at more handcrafted things? Are we looking at how to, so I think, at least in Denmark, I don't know, I can't speak to Sweden, but I think we also have a big task ahead of us of raising up the way that we consider our craftsmanships, because we have some kind of a elevation between the two right now, I think, in our society, and I think we owe it to the real human physical jobs that we start bringing them to a similar level. And there's so much creativity, there's so much research, there's so much innovation happening with with things that require more physical presence. And if we can start bridging those things also with universities, I think the conversation here about having a more orally based university system is super interesting. And I think even before AI, that was probably relevant. So bringing back those conversations as a place where universities create knowledge, I think is super cool.
What is the purpose of a university? Lots of people at CBS maybe say, to get a job. That's extrinsic motivation. I really like that they brought up this distinction between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. If you go back to the model of universities that were brought up by Humboldt, the idea was to give you a Bildung. I don't know what that's best translation into, but that is to develop as an individual. And I think we should turn back a little bit to that kind of idea at the universities. You develop as an individual, become a critical thinker, you are open-minded and so on, and you base your education on your intrinsic motivation.
And also, unfortunately, I don't think we're going to be out of work if we were that lucky. But I think every revolution or that's happened, we have created more work for people. So there will be different kind of work. But I do hope that we use this transformation in a good way to use the time in a different way so it makes more sense for us as humans. We have a big opportunity. Let's use it. So not more of the same. Wow, if we can work 4 hours a day instead of 8 or 15 or whatever people are working. So I hope the workload as a whole reduces and that we make something good for the humankind, all of us here. But I'm not that hopeful because we are quite stupid because we invent new jobs all the time.
You got to create shareholder value, right? There's an interesting parallel in the Industrial Revolution. I'm sure you're all familiar with the large narrative. Steam engine came, a lot of things happened, but maybe most of you are not aware that this was actually one of the worst periods to be a person in Great Britain since the Black Death. If you look at the statistics for like median life expectancy, how people were suffering, people had a very hard time because they lost jobs in droves and there was no safety net. And this directly led to the creation of the modern welfare state, one-to-one. The difference was that actually took a comparably long time. It took decades. And we are now looking at maybe a decade. So can you imagine now, if we're looking at some kind of large-scale labor displacement process, it will be slower in Europe, right? We have labor laws. But fundamentally, there will be a huge competitive pressures on every company that have any task in front of a computer to eventually replace that expensive human with a machine. How fast can we organize around that? There will be people who will find new jobs, but can you organize yourself around a new technology that fast? I'm not sure I would be able to. Like if Anna came tomorrow and said, yeah, Christian, your research is no longer needed. I have GPT 5.5. How fast could I do something other that would be valuable? It would take time. And for many people, it takes a long time. So even if we are inventing new things to do, there's a huge transition time that we're going into.
All right, thank you so much. Before we let you all go, Axis, is there something that you would like to add as the Swedish industry?
Yes, and I love that you brought up the Industrial Revolution, back to what Peter started with, and that we'll probably be in a time of chaos with a lot of aspects. But I also think that if you would ask any company, when will your R&D be done? I don't think they will say, oh, if we just do this, then we can just stop. Like all companies will just be trying to make things faster. And I think to continue competing, we will need humans to sit there and prompt these AIs to make it go faster. To some degree, we will be in a pretty, will probably be some scary times ahead. But I also think that we will still need humans, and especially once you go past the junior level, if you find companies that look ahead, you will need to hire people now that are good in a few years when you've learned what this company stands for and what it's about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you from me, Lucas, Alva, and Saga, who's also here as student representatives. So, thank you again. We will let you go now.
Okay. So we are about to close now. And Patricia, I want to thank you very much for this day.
Yes, indeed. And I hope we delivered on the purpose with that with, you know, mixing a lot of interesting views coming from academic side and students and cross borders. And I think that the discussions today has really delivered on that. So thank you, Johannes.
Thank you. So, and we will be back next year with 4 new seminars. What we are now, 4 is what we cope with, and it will perhaps be more AI, but not as explicitly as now. We will discuss democracy, China, I think, and security, a
and
lot,
intelligence. Yes,
and probably more than that. Thank you very much for your attention, and welcome back. And thank you, of course, the panelists and the presenters and everyone. And I didn't bring enough chocolate, but I have 2 more boxes if you want to have one. So,
thank you, and Merry Christmas.